So Alabama plays Kentucky on Saturday at 5 o'clock. I will be again in attendance for this game. It's going to be in Coleman. I do expect a very solid crowd. I think that Alabama has a lot to show in this game. And this is another elite offense that you're going against. This is a game in which they will expose you if you do not fix the things on offense or on defense that you've had issues with in the last couple games. If you continuously leave some three-point shooters open, if you lose some of the shooters in the scouting report and lose some of those, if you're super careless with the ball, now Kentucky's not an elite defensive team, but if you're uber careless with the ball, a guy like Otega Owe can definitely turn you over. A little bit different than in the first game. Currently, I'm recording this as of Thursday night. I still show that Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler as probable. They've been out the last few games, so even if either of these guys play, the question becomes what strength are they at? Are they near 100% or not? Both of those guys scored in double figures in the first game. Lamont Butler had a bigger impact in that first game than really any others. Butler had 17 points, had 8 assists, really was a do-it-all, played 32 minutes. He was a huge part in that first game. But Otega Owe kind of took over that first game in Lexington. He had 21 points and was an elite player for them. Both offenses in that game were, absolutely phenomenal. Alabama shoots a 1.31. Kentucky shoots a 1.24. To put that in perspective, 1.24 is what Alabama shot against Missouri when we just got blown out by 12. So, this is a situation where Alabama did not play great defense in that first game. Now, part of that is credit to Kentucky shooting. They shot 40% from three, 50% from the field, had 20 assists, right? The ball moved pretty well on both sides of the basketball, right? Alabama moved the ball well with 20 assists. Kentucky moved the ball well with 20 assists. This was a game that, Mark Sears had 9 assists. This was a game where Grant Nelson had 25 points. Mark Sears and Grant Nelson were your key factors in this game. I would expect that Kentucky tries to limit your key players being the difference. I feel like Kentucky's goal in this one's going to be make somebody not named Grant Nelson and Mark Sears beat me. Which, if I was a defensive team, that's what my goal would be as well. Not to say that Alabama does not have other guys, but if I was making a game plan to beat Alabama, see what you can do to limit Mark Sears and Grant Nelson. Because at times, LeBaron Philon is a bit streaky, right? He's in a pretty high stretch right now. He's doing pretty well, but he is somewhat streaky. Aiden Holloway has been very good, so there's a good chance that he continues playing well. But again, I will take my chances. Chris Youngblood is actually coming off a pretty poor shooting performance against Missouri, right? So that is a situation where if I'm Kentucky, especially due to the fact that Grant Nelson and Mark Sears are the guys that beat me in game one, if I'm Kentucky, I'm going to see what I can do to stop those guys from beating me in game two. I do think that a guy like Mohamed Diabate, got some run in game one, but did not have a as big of an impact. He had 8 rebounds, which obviously is huge. Alabama did pretty well on the glass. We only out-rebounded them by 4 in game one, right? So this was a situation where Kentucky in Rupp Arena, now obviously it was at their home arena, but Kentucky in Rupp Arena played pretty good basketball. As we've discussed at length, Alabama has not played particularly well at home. Now, I will say that Alabama now has dropped 2 games. So there is a level of, do they have some pride? Do they want to be able to prove something and show that, hey, we're still the basketball team you thought we were? We've had a couple of losses, but, we're still the basketball team you expect us to be. Maybe. I would love to see that, right? I would love to see us kind of sit down and defend. I would love to see us, hold Kentucky to a lower scoring game like we've seen them be held to, right? I mean, Texas held them to 78 points. Arkansas, they only scored 79. Vandy, on the road, they only scored 69, right? Georgia, they only scored 69, right? So they have been held to some lower scoring games at times this season. But the question becomes, can Alabama do that? They have not shown me anything on defense that says we would be able to do that. There are obviously a few things that I think really lend themselves to this being a positive for Alabama. Kentucky's one of the worst teams in the country at turning over the opposition. They're 348. So if Alabama does not have unforced turnovers, Kentucky doesn't do a great job getting steals and like forcing those turnovers upon you. They also do a terrible job running you off the 3-point line. They're in the 300s in that as well. So Alabama is going to have some 3-point shots. And just in general, Kentucky is not a great rim protection team. They're okay in blocks, but they're a pretty poor 2-point defensive team. So it's a situation where if Kentucky does try to run you off the line, I think Alabama would have a lot of success down low. This is a game that obviously will have a ton of pace. If you've seen any Alabama game this year, you know that Kentucky's top 40 in pace. Alabama's number 1. This game's going to run, right? There's going to be a ton of possessions. The first game had 78 possessions. Assume this one's going to get up into the high 70s, 80 possession range. This one's going to be running. I would expect that Alabama, has something to prove. I think the X factor in this one is, does Kentucky potentially get back a guy like Jackson Robinson or get back a guy like Lamont Butler that, energizes their team? Because I think Kentucky currently playing, 2 men down has changed up what they are. You've had some guys like Colin Chandler and Trent Noah, and honestly, even Travis Perry, some of the freshmen that have come in and started playing a little more, and especially like a Trent Noah and Travis Perry, both of those guys over 40% 3-point shooters. There's some guys that have energized Kentucky a little bit, but it's a situation of if you can have them playing at the level they've been playing at and still slide back in a Lamont Butler. So you have the shooting that a Trent Perry or Noah could bring you, but you also have the defense that a guy like Lamont Butler could bring. That could be a really good thing, right? That could be something that Kentucky could really use to take advantage of Alabama. Will they be able to? I'm not sure. That is a good question. That is one where I think only time's going to tell. Another one would be for me is, does a guy like Amari Williams get into foul trouble? At times in the Kentucky game, he was a huge menace for us. He had 11 rebounds, but he got into foul trouble and fouled out in that game in just 22 minutes. And I'm curious if he sees what a guy like Mark Mitchell did for Missouri and thinks, oh, I can dominate a game like that against Alabama. I think it's possible, right? I think that you could see a situation where Alabama, potentially sees a slightly different game plan. Obviously, Kentucky doesn't play through the interior a ton. They're a pretty fast-paced team. But Amari Williams is a guy who they're okay with playing through, especially with some of the injuries to the backcourt. So that becomes the question for Kentucky, right? Does Amari Williams take over this game? Andrew Carr, another guy that was in foul trouble a ton in the first game. He had 4 fouls in 18 minutes, really was not a huge impact in that game. If he doesn't get in foul trouble, is this potentially another one where he gets more run? And so Alabama sees a little bit different Kentucky team. They're going to see a different Kentucky team, at least due to the injuries with Jackson Robinson and Lamont Butler. Even if those guys play, I would expect them not to play at the level that they did in that first game. But, the question becomes, when you have 2 guys that played a lot in the first game and then 2 guys that got into a lot of foul trouble in the first game, you could see a little bit different Kentucky team than who you saw in that first game. So that's something that sometimes worries me, is a team, is like, oh, we shut down this guy in the first game, And in reality, either they were coming back from injury or maybe they, were in foul trouble. And so you undersell how good one of the opposition guys was because of how well you did on them in the first game. And then in the second game, they go off on you, right? So that would be one that I want to watch for this game. I think that Alabama should be able to have some success, but it is something for me to watch, like an Andrew Carr or an Amari Williams. Those are two guys that, didn't have crazy games in the first one. I know Amari had a pretty good game. He had the double-double, but was not his most efficient night by any stretch of the imagination. And I know he's coming off of like 100% shooting performance. So, the question becomes like, how well does he do in this next game? So those are some things that I would look at in this game. I do think that Alabama wins this game. I think it's due to the fact that I just don't trust Kentucky's defense. I think that Alabama will be able to find something on defense. I don't know what that is. And I think part of that may even be, good fortune of the fact that, you don't want somebody to be hurt, but Alabama's not catching Kentucky at full strength. Now, Alabama's not full strength either, but Alabama has had to weather this for much more of the season than Kentucky has, right? Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson have played a good bit more than like a Darion Reed has here recently. So this is a situation where I think Alabama's just used to playing without Reed, whereas Lamont Butler and Jackson Robinson are a little bit more of forces for Kentucky. So I do think that Alabama can win this game. I would expect both teams to get out and run in this one. I expect this one to be a pretty high-scoring game. My thought in this one is Alabama 96, Kentucky 84. 96-84. Let's go 96-88. 96-88. Like I said, I do think that Alabama can win this game. I think that Alabama is going to have to sit down and defend, but I think that the Missouri game, as much as they were elite shooting the ball, I think that it embarrassed Alabama, and it's going to have them kind of ready to prove what they can do. So, like I said, let's go with 96-88 is my prediction for this one. As always, I will have a thread breaking down this game over on Twitter. It's going to come out the morning of the basketball game. So if you are interested, subscribe to me over on Twitter. Follow me over there, and I will put out that thread Saturday morning. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.